Well, good morning, everybody. I've got a lot loaded up for you today on this Friday briefing as we work our way into this weekend. And as you look at this satellite animation just from yesterday as the sun was setting, I'm just going to give you kind of a quick update on what we're going to be talking about. The first thing is going to be the placement of the ridge throughout the western United States. We're going to talk about the smoke. We're going to talk about convection that'll roll around this ridge. We're going to keep an eye on the moisture coming out of this very weak tropical kind of impulse that's happening off the southeast coast and how it could deliver rains across one of the driest spots in the country compared to historical averages. All right, after that, we're going to walk through a quick update on drought, the drought scenario across the country. And then what I'm going to do is get you through our 5-model assessment. At the end of this, we're going to talk about some of the things that are transitioning later this summer. We've got a little bit of a easterly wind burst happening, which is indicative of maybe a sign of some life in La Niña, what that could mean for much later this summer into fall. And then at the very end, I'm going to walk you through several models looking out at the late summer into fall precipitation outlook, and we'll finish with a global update. So I'm looking forward to giving you all this today. So here we go. This was, again, just yesterday as the sun was setting. And again, what you're probably focusing in on is all the wildfire smoke that's throughout the west, came out of Canada. It's sitting in the Midwest now. And we had a lot of isolated convection around this. Just kind of focusing in on the western U.S. wildfire smoke, though. Some very intense fires. We've been watching this one now for several days, the one in Northern California as well. But very intense and very dense smoke from these wildfires are spreading across parts of Oregon into Idaho as well, where the temperatures just continue to be blistering hot. Now remember, most of the Northwest through spring and early summer couldn't get heat, and now all of a sudden we flipped a switch and really just taken off with heat, and I don't see a lot of reprieve in sight. Throughout Montana, some isolated convection, but overall we saw very smoky, very hot, and very windy conditions as well. As the sun is setting, you get that more oblique angle where the sun strikes the smoke, and you can see a bit better kind of its extent, and very clear throughout, well, not clear at all, but it's very clear on the imagery just to see how dense that smoke is in the middle upper levels of the atmosphere. Now, as I mentioned a few moments ago, a lot of isolated convection. Some of these storms really were popping. There's some large storms, especially rolling around the ridge. In fact, watch it again. You can kind of see the placement of the ridge right almost in the center of the four corner states and the storms that just explode around the edge of it. But throughout parts of the Midwest, even though there was some smoke in the atmosphere, we were able to get some storms to pop in this area. And you can again see the storms that are going to be associated with this weak tropical system making their way along the East Coast here very soon. This is actually leftover cloud cover from Beryl. Backside, but still some leftover cloud cover from Beryl. But I want to take you into my home state of Illinois. And we're going to zoom in here and take you back to yesterday. And I just want to show you something. While we watched some of these larger storms to our south, some of this convection rolling right in through this area had kind of a bit of a unique flair to it. And last night, my daughter is about to turn 15, so we went to the church parking lot, and I was just letting her drive the truck around completely empty just to get used to this, right? That's what all parents do. And I noticed as I looked off toward the west, so this was in Champaign I did this, that there was some interesting and relatively deeper convection. Now, this is nothing, right? I've shown you so many images and videos, and I'm sure you all are tuned into storm chasers that all spring long saw some absolutely insane convection. This is 2024 being one of the most active severe weather years on record. But this was a picture sent to me by a guy named Robert, and he lives just a little bit farther to my west. And inside of this, that doesn't look like much, does it? But there's a funnel cloud produced, and my daughter and I saw it. I said, let's get out. Let me get in the driver's seat. We drove out there as quickly as we could to kind of watch this. But Robert got a better picture than I did, and I appreciate him sending it to me. And it's just a funnel cloud. And it's interesting, his email was like, is this a funnel cloud? Like, what's going on here? And it is. That is never touched ground, but certainly some circulation. He says, can you explain this to me? And I said, sure. So, Robert, here you go. This is a sounding from Lincoln, Illinois last night. And this sounding represents the temperature and dew point temperature profile. That's this line, temperature, and this one, dew point, going up in the atmosphere. And eventually gets into the stratosphere way up here, but that's it. Now you see this dash line on the outside? that would be the line that would trace out what we call a parcel. So if there's a storm, we're going to try to trace out its temperature. And this is it. And so that storms are warmer than their environment. That's why they exist. That's why they're buoyant. And there was plenty of buoyancy in the atmosphere to support these storms. We measure that in a value called CAPE, and there's lots of different ways to measure that. But the reality was we had plenty of moisture. Notice how close the temperature and dew point temperature line are. And the atmosphere was unstable. But if you would have just shown me this wind shear profile, I would have said, well, that or looking at the hodograph, which is another way of viewing wind shear as a function of height or change in wind speed direction, I would have said, no, this isn't going to make anything. Like this is not a wind shear profile that would say look out for funnel clouds and tornadoes. But what this fails to capture is kind of the micrometeorology of these storms. And I want to show you what was going on. So this is, my goodness, these are just scattered storms. Remember, we talked a lot about how this pattern is going to be capable of producing scattered storms. And again, this is my county right here, Champaign County. And Robert was looking right over here. So what you notice on this is that all of these little individual storms, and they're small, produce their own little bits of outflow. Can you see kind of the rings that leave the storms? That's where the downdraft hits the ground and moves forward. And some of these outflow boundaries, they intersect. And what they can do is just imagine you have winds from different directions hitting each other. And so what you end up getting in this case is horizontal wind shear. Okay, so just you bring one wind from one direction, one from the other, and it hits, there's going to spin up into little eddies. And I think that's what happened at the base of this guy right here. That's the little storm. Look at it. It's nothing. We've had supercells that are the size of Champaign County, and that little guy right there briefly spun up and was capable of producing the very small funnel cloud that came out of it. So thankfully did no damage. In fact, that storm itself barely made a lot of rain. But I wanted to show you, Robert, so that I was on it too. It was a lot of fun to go out there and watch it. My daughter was fascinated, and she did a fantastic job driving my truck. Her goal was to not hit a single yellow line in a parking lot with pretty sharp angles, and she nailed it. So I'm pretty excited to get this kid driving. Okay, back to the weather here. Next thing I want to do, let's blow this up so we can see it a little bit better here, is I want to talk about where this is all going. Now, we continue to see the same story. We have excessive heat watches and warnings in the west, and we know that this heat is going to be expanding into the midsection of the country this weekend. But this has got me very excited because we've talked all week about how this low, this very weak tropical kind of looking low, it's even got an upper level part to it, but whatever, it's going to be bringing moisture in here. And we're focusing so much on this area because of how dry it's been. For the last 30 days, and this goes beyond 30 days, we can really just hone in on this map and see the importance of the rains that could be coming from this feature through parts of North South Carolina, Virginia, Maryland, Delaware, hitting some key agricultural acres. My problem with this pattern is if you're behind this in this particular region, it's going to be, I think, several more days before we get moisture into these states that I've kind of outlined here. Because we're going to be waiting on a system mid to late week next week to drop a front down here to finally use some of the flow around the Bermuda high to make some storms. So we'll come back to that in a few seconds. But again, this is a 30-day percent of normal map. If we just kind of take a look, it's not given much of a chance to develop right now. It's 0% chance according to the National Hurricane Center, but we're keeping an eye on it, and it may look something like this. So kind of zooming in on the southeast here, we just play this forward through the day today. A lot of possibly deeper storms here with plenty of moisture. It's not like a big widespread area that's just going to get absolutely soaked, but you can see that circulation coming on, and the high-res NAM is at least trying to dump some rain with this throughout the weekend before it exits early Sunday morning. So again, back in time here, just watch throughout the day today into tomorrow and Saturday, getting into early Sunday. So we need the moisture from that system pretty desperately. To kind of put this to a point, this is your last 30 days. No, I'm sorry. This goes back to June 1st. So this is this is about 42 days. Looking at precipitation ranks. And so this is that area that we're thinking about hitting. Now on the back side of that, this region, we're going to have to wait a bit longer on getting the moisture into this particular area and also down to the southeast a bit more. But just again, we've shown this all week, but I think it's an important map to continue to examine given what recently the rains from Beryl did how wet the upper Midwest has been and how extremely dry we've been in the West as the heat has kind of poured into this area, which we're going to cover more in just a few moments. From there, though, I want to show you kind of a 7-day, look back at the rainfall just to kind of get the full sense of what Beryl did. So remember, Beryl began life east of the Lesser Antilles, went south of Jamaica, doing a lot of damage to the Yucatan Peninsula, delivered some moisture to Mexico, but really made this hard turn and just followed right through some key acres here, eventually getting into Ontario. Went over top of Toronto and made its way out eventually through the Canadian Maritimes. What a beautiful storm, doing something that typically we don't see until September. Now, there was a lot of damage. I saw wind damage in Indiana. We've, of course, had a lot of wind damage down here in Texas, many still without power because of this. So this is not to make light of this situation, but as I think through where this moisture went, I just want to show you something in the Midwest here. So this is a 30-day percent of normal map I showed you on Monday, okay? And I want to show you the newest update. So take a look at that difference. Just when we get the moisture from Beryl in this area, the difference that it made. So the one on Monday, this is the one I made this morning, which has data through yesterday. One other thing to point out is I went and pulled the NDVI data, which did update this week for Arkansas, Missouri, Illinois, Indiana, and Michigan. And I did mask it like I showed you yesterday in the video for crops. And the NDVI values right now are at the highest of the historic distribution in these states. So I know earlier in the week we focused on the northwestern Corn Belt. Now I'm focusing on this part of it. I left Ohio out. We had a lot of missing data here, and there's parts of Ohio that are in much drier conditions. In fact, let's just go look at it real quick. It's all right, got time. And if we just click only on Ohio, see how it's a little bit lower than the rest of the states in that area. So just wanted to kind of make that point so you could see it here. But our soil moisture map down to 100 centimeters or 40 inches shows the really wet upper Midwest, the track of Beryl. That dryness that we mentioned will have to be waiting till midweek next week to get some correction on. Some recent dryness that's been kind of creeping back into the data here in Kansas and parts of Oklahoma are more, really kind of surprising, although sporadic at times, southwest monsoon, and then the extremely dry conditions that have been in parts of the Northwest. And this right in through here, just so you know, is a key agricultural area. And to see such dry soils in that area is just getting very concerning. Now, coming back to the Midwest, right in through here, I wanted to show you, this was put out yesterday by the Earth Observatory, that's a part of NASA. And they, using Landsat data, made a, looking back at those heavy rains, this is a comparison to June 9th to June 24th, looking at the flooding we saw on the Missouri River and the Big Sioux River, and also the Floyd River, which is here. And so where are you in the world? This is, coming into parts of South Dakota towards Sioux City, Iowa, and just take a look at that. That's a lot of flooding. So before and after, and they're still cleaning up from this. So we've had a lot of pockets damaged by flooding. Back in June, we had the hail we discussed all week long that hit parts of Iowa, but really hit Nebraska hard. So I just think it's a good illustration of some of the major stresses we're seeing. I also wanted to give you one more update here on the river situation because all that water has eventually got to get into the Mississippi. And now we've got flooding on this side of it as well. So the moisture that's coming into the soil that percolates into the river, we're going to continue to see flooding here. I'll be driving over the Mississippi on Saturday midday, so I'll be looking forward to seeing what the condition of that river looks like. That brings me to the latest drought monitor. As you see here, we've seen some degradation of drought in a few key areas, which we're going to hit on, but about 50% of the land area of the lower 48 is in some form of drought, from abnormally dry all the way up to exceptional drought. But I find it more instructive to look at the change maps. So over the last 6 weeks, we're now looking where drought has gotten worse in these shades. The degradation shades and improvement are here. Now remember, this map is made on Tuesday, and the rain that came through Illinois, Indiana, and Michigan was on Tuesday night and a Wednesday. So Beryl came through this area and wiped this out. So this is going to come off the map. But throughout the southeast, which we've already looked at, the south central United States, degradation here, and a lot in the northwest. And so let's take a quick look at those areas starting in the south central part of the U.S. So we know we're waiting on rains to come in through this area, but will we continue to stay drier in this part of Kansas, Oklahoma, pockets of Texas? That's going to be a concern going forward here. So It's amazing to think that you've got some places in Kansas that are doubled up on their rainfall in the last 30 days. And just right down the road, places that are half or even a little bit farther to south around the Red River that are 10 to 12% of normal. So this rainfall disparity here is quite large. Going into the northwest, this is where we see some extremely low values. Now, this is the dry season anyway, but we are considerably drier than that. So we've not even had our normal June storm activity, which can happen in parts of Oregon and Washington and Idaho, and even in Northern California. And the map over here, which shows better than average precip for parts of Montana, is a bit deceiving simply because lately we've seen some extremely hot, windy, and smoky conditions with only isolated convection. So a lot of this moisture was earlier in the 30-day time period, and we can quickly get into dry conditions coming off the flow of these mountains. So just something to consider there. But since we're talking about the Northwest, let's go ahead and have a look at our 48-hour forecast of smoke. And we continue to see some of the Canadian wildfire smoke spreading across the southern Canadian prairie, but most of the smoke that the models are forecasting will be coming out of the western United States. Some of the fires we took a look at just at the very beginning of this. Okay, from here, let's talk about this pattern, all right? Right now, this is the ridge around which that smoke is flowing. And our jet stream is way to the north. I'm just kind of drawing a few lines, keeping an idea of where the southern extent of it is. As we go into this weekend, we do have a shortwave that's sneaking through Canada, and it's going to set off the chance for some severe storms here. And those storms are going to start to spill into the upper Midwest and northern plains as well. But as I look at it here out through Sunday, one large ridge and another right there. And this one's going to be important. That's Bermuda High, influencing the moisture in the south and southeast. We'll talk more about that in a second. But as we play out there from Sunday into Monday, Tuesday, this is going to be the trough that sneaks through and drives a front that's going to cool things off here first while the heat stays in the west. And this is the front we're going to be watching to get into this area to hopefully bring in needed moisture. So here's Wednesday into Thursday of next week. That is the front we're going to be watching. Now after that, looks like by next Thursday into Friday, pattern goes back over pretty highly amplified. So that's more meridional north-south flow, and the ridge goes right back to where it was, anchored over the Four Corner States, and that's where it is now. But the difference is we brought in a broader trough farther to these. So a week from now, next Friday morning, we're looking at something like this. So we need to see how long we keep, excuse me, this cooler air around while the Canadian prairie gets hot and the western United States gets hot. But out there next Saturday into Sunday, this will be something to watch. Can we get this trough to come out of the Gulf of Alaska, getting into the northwest, breaking the heat? And how will it initiate storms that'll roll over this ridge and come right through parts of the plains and Midwest? I think that's going to be the case as we look out here into this time period. See that guy right there? That'll initiate storms, and they'll build into what should still be an open Gulf of Mexico pattern. But what happens as we get out there to the end of the month? The ridge went right back in the forecast to where it has been, which has largely been anchored here. So what's interesting about this is if you'd asked me months ago where I thought ridge placement was going to be, I would have thought this would have been more in the southern plains, not in the Four Corner States. That was my concern, staying in the southern plains. But as it stands, the models toward the end of the month are trying to put this right here into the into the Four Corner States. So that's your pattern for the next couple of weeks. Those storms are going to start in Canada first, and that's why we've got the air quality warnings that are out. That's what this shade represents. And this is all severe thunderstorm watch. As we work our way farther, into this weekend, here's today's SPC outlook for storms, so marginal risk here. But once we get into tomorrow, the 13th, it's going to kind of edge out of Canada, across the northern plains, upper Midwest. And then as we get into the day on Sunday, again, we're going to watch that Red River Valley of the North to be the place where the storms are going to ride. Okay, seeing it on the high-res models, let's just play this through pretty quickly here. Through Friday, getting into this evening, a lot of isolated storms. Can you see this? We're going to see the same thing we've been seeing. Isolated storms. The moisture's in place. Yes, there's smoke, but we'll be able to get storms to crank out of this. They're just not going to be big organized systems. It's going to be isolated. There's our rain from the tropical system that's over the southeast. So then, as we work our way into the overnight hours and early Saturday morning, we'll have to watch for some overnight convection coming through the Red River Valley of the North. and what it could do into the upper Midwest. But see the ridge? I mean, this is really well defined. Saturday, again, that's why the Storm Prediction Center is keeping an eye on this area. But I think we could get isolated storms across a broader section here of the Midwest as they roll around the ridge coming out of Canada. And I just think that's the setup we're going to be in for a while. So that gets you all the way to Sunday. Let's go ahead and have a look at the 7-day outlooks then. This is from the AIFS system, the artificial intelligence, looking at the next 7 days. We expected the AIFS to struggle a bit in summer just because I think it's going to be hard for it to pick up on convection given its resolution issues and the way the model's built. But it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be better than these models. This is a blend of models put out by the National Weather Service. So isolated storms in places, right? And this will be that front we're going to watch about a week from now. And this is the tropical system this weekend. As we get out to the WPC, again, critical front coming through here. This is the European model solution for the next 7 days. And here's the GFS, which is finally back up and fully operational for me. Just to let you all know, I have finally finished rebuilding the new server that I'm going to be using. Got some of the new map structure done, and was pretty happy using some interesting coding techniques, able to generate about 10,000 maps in 25 minutes from each model. So I can't wait to build this new site for you and show it to you. We're going to get rid of this old projection and use one that's common for all the maps. And I'll be able to show you this with that as well, which is the difference between the European model and the GFS, and we'll be able to compare the others to it as well, including all the ensembles. One thing I want to note with this is take a look at how much wetter the GFS is here. And this event down here in Texas, the European went off crazy on this morning. We'll have to keep an eye on that as well. But to see the models compared side by side, GFS left, European right, let's just play this out here. We've seen through Saturday. Again, we're going to be watching for the isolated storms in this area. What's left, a little bit better seen, I think, in the European here from the tropical push. And then getting into the weekends, Sunday into Monday of next week and Tuesday. Now, this is the point where I want to watch carefully. This is next Wednesday morning, Wednesday midday, Wednesday evening. You can see where the models are leaving the front. Now, the European's a bit slower. It's got a broader Bermuda high, and it's pumping in moisture. Now, I'm going to focus over here for a second because the European model Wednesday into Thursday, that's Thursday morning. This is the front that's going to sag to hit these key acres that have been so dry. And as you can see, the European model trying to bring in rain to one of the drier sectors here of the country. That is midweek next week. I will watch this trend all weekend long to see if this is going to verify. And if we could leave that front lingering, feeding off of Gulf moisture like we talked about yesterday, as more activity starts to move across the Canadian prairie, that could really set us up for more hot and stormy conditions. So through the weekend, this is who we have the best chance at getting an inch of precipitation. As I then play to when that front comes through, watch right in the Midwest getting toward the Ohio Valley in this part of the Mid-South. This is by through next Wednesday. And by next Thursday and Friday, when we include that, we're starting to see an increase in the chances of precip. If I take you out a full 10 days on this, this is the best probability of getting an inch of rain. So take note, outside of some isolated storms, that area that I showed you that was dry, forgive me, that area that I showed that was flooded has a little bit of a drier signal to it. And we're going to get some chance to get some warmth in here for a few days this weekend before the cold front comes through and bring some moisture in. But overall, once we get out there beyond this week, the models have been pretty consistent, especially the CPC and the European, with keeping this whole region wetter than average. And part of that is the front lingers, but the Bermuda high is pumping. And we're just going to see better moisture into this area. I really buy into this forecast right now for the week 2 time frame. And what's really important about it to me is this. I mean, we've assessed this drought area, and even the CPC yesterday said there's a moderate risk from the 19th to the 21st of bringing in excessively wet conditions to this area. Got to watch that carefully. Okay, from there, let's talk temperatures. I may need to restart this. Here we go. This is the last week. Watch this heat build in the west. These dots represent where we are approaching or setting, breaking, tying high temperature records. And I mean, it has been absolutely scorched throughout the west with respect to these temperatures. And again today, just looking at the all hazards weather map, we got air quality issues, heat watches, warnings, and advisories just continue. And we're expecting today's high temperatures to look something like this. Again, 108 to 115 in the Central Valley, deep into the 90s, cracking 100 around the Snake River Valley, eastern Oregon. Still hot and windy in parts of Montana. Temperatures on the eastern side of Montana getting up in the upper 90s. Look right down the Front Range, 100-plus degree temperatures in Colorado, getting into Kansas and Oklahoma. And as I take you from Friday into Saturday, that's going to be a hot one for the country. There's Sunday. Look at this weekend. Very, very hot conditions across the country here. But by Monday, Tuesday, remember that's when the low goes through parts of Ontario. There's the front, dropping in some cooler weather. But it's only here. The southeast up the east coast, hot. The northwest stays hot. The northwest, you're going to have to wait until you get past next Thursday for that trough to come through to maybe knock the temperatures down a little bit. But that's a week out. Day 5 through 10, I wanted to show you this first. 7-day forecast of total evaporation. With that heat spreading, we're going to see evaporation rates between 1.5 inches and 2.5 inches here, but throughout the southwest and into like the Columbia Basin, very high evaporation rates on the heat that's being maintained. This is the day 5 through 10, so now we can see the effect of that cooler weather coming back into the Midwest, while the heat just occupies a large part of the western half of North America. And day 10 through 15 reflects kind of a similar pattern. This is all a result of the ridging tending to stay a bit more here as the Bermuda high comes flexing in and the Pacific high sits in this area. And it's also echoed in the European. Now, if you've hung on with me this long, let's talk about some bigger picture things. And we're going to go back to ocean temperatures. I still think these are the dominant players. The warm Atlantic, the stronger trades, the trades trying to get going here. The PMM has gone back neutral. The warmer water has inched its way in, but there's a lot of warm water here promoting the Bermuda high. They're kind of working in tandem with one another. So I want to think about what this could do. And I'm going to start off first with stuff that's going on with respect to rising and sinking motion. Why have I made a call for the hurricane season to kind of back off a little bit? Well, if you just look over the next 15 days, this represents suppression in the atmosphere. This is sinking motion, and it's sitting right over this area. We have our rising motion in the Indian Ocean, maybe getting here north of Australia. But take a look at this. Over the next 15 days, we've got a little bit of see the blues in here? This represents where there is an easterly wind burst, and we expect to see more and more of these as we approach late summer into fall. That is your La Niña. That's the La Niña type response we have to see. One doesn't do it. You got to have many of these things to make this occur. And what I'll be watching for is this. Now, the map, 250 millibars. That's way up where the jet stream is. This is the zonal component of the wind. So if you see these colors, the west to east flow is stronger. If you see these colors, it's weaker. I will be watching for the zonal winds near the surface here to become very, very weak, in fact, easterly. And if that occurs, it'll steal the momentum here, which we've had for most of summer. You see, that shows this kind of unbroken and relatively fast piece of the jet stream that's been coming from Japan all the way through the Gulf of Alaska and riding the U.S.-Canada border. That's what I'm waiting to see change when La Niña gets here. But as it stands, we just kind of zoom in. We've got pockets of cooler water, and you looked earlier this week with me. We've got cooler water underneath the surface that could upwell, but I got to get more consistent easterly wind bursts to make that happen. In the meantime, the Atlantic is ready. It is primed. But as you saw a few moments ago, there's suppression in the upper atmosphere here, which is why we're backing off on the hurricane season. That and there's dust. You can see the Saharan dust as kind of this shading in this area. And we've been modeling it, of course, and you can see the dust plumes coming off of the Sahara, which is also helping to kind of suppress the near-term activity with the hurricane season. But this isn't going to last long. We know we're approaching August, and August, September, October, those are your big 3 months for tropical activity. And what will be important to watch during that time frame is the strength of the Bermuda high. Now you've got the Bermuda high placed here, but you see the warmer colors representing where it'll be stronger. So it's going to be stronger on its northern sides, approaching the U.S., expanding toward Great Britain, which means this flow underneath it is going to be guided by that. But that's your Bermuda high. There's your Pacific high, displaced a little bit farther to the north. And this seems to be what's anchoring the ridging that's happening over the western United States, really the Four Corner states. If we just take a quick look a bit closer at the 30-day outlook on precip during that time frame, the influence of that Bermuda high has got this region wetter. And while we see a drier signal that's all throughout this region, I would not tell you to bank on it being bone dry. I think there's still plenty of storms because if the Bermuda high's here, it's opening up to moisture. And if we keep seeing ridging that lives in this area, you will get storms that cascade over the top of this. So don't turn the colors into kind of a binary yes or no, like yes, super wet, no rain here. That's not how we want to do this. But thinking about where this might go beyond this, let's take a look at something we talked about earlier this week. We know the new European model has really stalled out the formation of La Niña. From now through January, it's just really kept things into neutral. That forecast is not shared, though, by all the models. For example, the CFSV2. The CFSV2 continues to forecast about 1 degree to 1.5 degrees cooler than average ocean temperatures by late fall. And so it's still more aggressive. And one of the great websites I love to compare everything to in terms of forecast is BOM's website, the Bureau of Meteorology. Now, this is their forecast for INSO neutral all the way through December. But we can compare the Australians to the Canadians to the Europeans. This is the Japanese, the French, the US, and the British. And here we're seeing forecasts for August. This is September, October, November, and December. So we went through those relatively quickly, but the idea here is to show you that BOM and the Europeans are now, they're very weak INSO neutral. It's the Canadians and NOAA that are more aggressive. UK Met also stepped up. But the point is here, we will likely move into a weak La Niña situation by fall, which will really influence the hurricane season and also influence our upcoming seasonal forecast for winter. So here's the quick recap of all of this. Now, this is just models. We really only take these at face value, and we're just going to look at them. This is the July, August, September forecast for precipitation anomalies. We notice that August, September, October, November, and then October, November, December. We're keeping wetter conditions to the north and drier to the south overall. Okay, let's just go back and plant this right on fall harvest time period. So this is what we've got. Active hurricane season finishing up, but a drier signal. Just a drier signal with wetter coming in here first. That is telltale La Niña start. Is that echoed in the NMME? Well, remember, the NMME, the National Multi-Model, the multi-models are down here. This is its forecast for August, September, October. Active hurricane season, drier interior. This is what we've got for, again, here's the models, September, October, November. And then as we get into October, November, December, see how it's starting to get wet here first? That's a sign of La Niña. And then farther out, this would be looking at the CFSV2, which is one of the models in the NMME. And I just wanted to show you, because you can kind of look July, August, September here, August, September, October, November. But take a look by the time we get into winter. It is really going aggressively after a typical La Niña winter, which is wet north, cold north, dry south, warm south. So I told you a moment ago, face value. We're just looking at the models. I have yet to know how fall is going to shape up with La Niña before we make any strong sense out of what this is going to be. All right. So here's the last thing I want to cover now that we've just got a quick summary of these models. Look at by the way, December, January, February. If you told me to put into a textbook what La Niña is supposed to look like, that's what I would draw for you. Big time Ohio Valley storm track. Storms enter the northwest. We leave California to Texas, all the way to Florida, out of the flow. No subtropical jet. That's La Niña. But you got to remember something when you look at this. This is the model that's most aggressive on bringing it in. So we'll just leave it at that and keep an eye out on how this is going to go moving forward. All right, last thing, 10-day outlook globally. Same story we've had for a while. Take a look at Ukraine and this part of Russia. Most models continue to paint this very dry and hot. If we come back again to the precip, very wet, southern India, Southeast Asia, but southeastern parts of China have gone dry as the Mayu front stretches north. And now a region that had been extremely dry back in May and early June has now got flooding threat across it. We continue to see active convection coming off of the Sahel, but there's too much dust to do anything with. And that frontal boundary that had been over parts of South America is starting to break up a bit, and we're losing that strong precip signal. So with that, I hope I gave you enough to just think about all weekend, and I'll be watching it over the weekend, and we'll talk next Monday. So have a good one. Thanks.